L'operazione dà il nome retaggio alle stelle.
Is this their new sister and brother, Oliver? Oliver lost his family just like you guys. Needed someone that could give him special care. Listen. Some people believe the spirit stays in the body for months after death.
On a bright, sunny morning, a teenager named Piper, who is visually impaired and can only see shapes and light, waits for her stepbrother Andy after her goalball practice. While waiting, she overhears a group of teenagers gossiping. Hoping to make some friends, she approaches them, but they respond with coldness and distance. Just then, Andy arrives. Trying to lighten the mood, Piper jokes to the group that she doesn't even know who he is. Despite her attempt at humor, the teens remain uninterested, so Andy gently steers her away.
They didn't like me, did they?
Andy, trying to comfort her, lies and says they did. He then begins describing what they looks like, joking that their fashion sense could use an upgrade, which makes Piper laugh. Later at home, Andy is outside fixing the side view mirror of his car when Piper suddenly calls out to him, saying that their dad, Phil, isn't responding from inside the bathroom. He forces the bathroom door open with a knife and finds his father collapsed on the floor, clearly dead from what appears to be a bad fall. Stunned, he freezes, unable to process what he's seeing. Piper arrives moments later and feels her stepfather's body on the floor. Overcome with emotion, she breaks down, insisting, "He just had chemo. He was supposed to be getting better." As paramedics wheel Phil out on a gurney, Andy notices the gurney keeps getting caught on the threshold. The next day, a social worker named Wendy informs Piper that, since she's underage, she'll be moving in with a kind foster mother named Laura. Then she tells Andy he'll be placed in a separate care unit. Andy protests, insisting he needs to stay with Piper because he has always looked after her. He adds that he plans to file for Piper's custody as soon as he turns 18, which is just 3 months away. Wendy sympathizes but explains that Laura has had difficulties in the past fostering children with troubled histories. This surprises Piper, who says grapefruit to Andy, a code word between them that means tell the truth. Andy quietly admits that he got into some trouble when he was 8 years old. Wendy then asks him to stay out of trouble for the remaining 3 months until he's eligible for custody. He agrees, and after a pause, she decides to place them together. Later, once everything's packed up, Andy and Piper lie under the table in silence. A faint plane passes overhead. Andy glances toward Piper and, trying to cheer her up, says, "That's how it works. When people die, they don't just get buried or cremated. They catch a flight to heaven just like Dad." The next day, they head toward their new house. Piper holds her father's pillow as a keepsake. During the drive, Andy lifts the sun visor so that Piper can feel the shapes of the sunlight. An hour later, they arrive at Laura's house. While trying to park, Andy accidentally bumps the car into a brick, so he pulls it back a little, stopping a short distance from the house. When they reach the doorstep, Laura calls out cheerfully, urging them to come inside. Laura greets Piper with exaggerated enthusiasm and suggests they take a group photo. However, when posing, she conveniently positions her head to block Andy's face from view. Then, she excitedly tells Piper she must meet her dog, Pom Pom. But it turns out to be a taxidermied version of the dog. Laughing, Laura adds that her cat Junkman isn't stuffed and adds, "Not yet." Andy notices a rug with a tactile strip for the visually impaired and asks if it's for Piper. Laura reveals that it's for her blind daughter Kathy. Curious, Andy asks if she's in the house, but Laura reveals that she has passed. Andy apologizes while Piper asks how she died. Laura weakly tells her she drowned in the pool. She is then interrupted by a phone call from Wendy. Piper and Andy take the chance to explore the backyard. In doing so, they accidentally let the cat out. Laura quickly shouts at them not to let it out. While Andy tries to call the cat back, he notices a young boy tightly holding it inside the empty pool. Just then, Laura rushes over, grabs the cat from the boy. The boy's unsettling stare lingers on Andy and Piper. Once inside, Laura explains to them that she is also fostering one other child named Oliver, who lost his family just like them. She adds that he's been selectively mute ever since Kathy died. Then Piper asks Andy how Oliver looks like. Not wanting her to worry, he lies and says Oliver looks cute, and that he's actually smiling at her. She pauses, then asks what color his hair is. Before Andy can come up with anything, Laura cuts in and says, he has red curly hair. That afternoon, Andy goes outside to grab their things from the car, and that's when he notices a strange white circle covering the house, but he ignores it. He heads back inside and follows Laura as she leads Piper to her room, mentioning it used to belong to Kathy. At the door, Laura simply tells Andy his room is right next door. Andy enters his small, cramped room, noticing that the door doesn't even close all the way. An hour later, Andy is texting a friend when Laura quietly enters his room, startling him. Casually, she asks if he plans to apply for guardianship in 3 months. Andy replies, yes. Just then, his phone pings. Curious, Laura asks if it's his girlfriend. Andy shakes his head and says it is just a friend. Laura makes herself comfortable and then asks what they were talking about, if it was something about his dad. Andy just gives her an awkward smile, avoiding the question. Laura presses on, mentioning she used to be a counselor. Still, Andy doesn't open up. Then they hear Piper's voice through the wall. Grateful for the interruption, Andy uses it as an excuse to walk over and talk to her instead. While he's distracted, Laura seizes the moment and reads his message. Andy notices too late. Before leaving, Laura says, her face unreadable, "We're all fucking weirdos, huh?" and walks out. Frustrated, Andy starts lifting weights to clear his mind. Meanwhile, Piper is settling into her new room while Laura watches from outside, a small, unsettling smile on her face. Night falls. Laura checks the weather app on her phone, then inserts a VHS tape into the player and begins watching a strange occult ritual on her TV. At midnight, after turning and tossing for some time, Andy gets up and looks out the window. He sees Laura and Oliver heading into the garden shed. The next day, Laura paints a small white horizontal line across the pool, then looks up at the sky in silence. Sometime later, Laura yells for Andy to wake up. He jolts awake, noticing drool on his face, and that he's also wet the bed. Embarrassed, he gathers the sheets in his clothes and puts them in the washing machine. He heads to the bathroom for a shower, but his mind flashes back to finding his father dead on the bathroom floor. Upstairs, Laura locks Oliver inside his room. Then she takes both Piper and Andy to Phil's funeral. At the service, Piper whispers to Andy, asking if their dad looks good. Without actually looking, Andy says yes. Suspicious, Piper says, "Grapefruit." Andy still lies. After the service, Laura cuts a lock of Phil's hair. Outside, she approaches Andy, telling him he'll regret it if he doesn't see his father's face one last time. She adds that some people believe the spirit stays in the body for months after death. Piper feels betrayed that Andy lied. Meanwhile, Oliver breaks his room's window and sneaks out. He makes his way to the shed, but since it is locked, so he ends up staring at the nearby chicken coop. Back at the funeral, Laura takes Andy inside and encourages him to kiss his father goodbye. Reluctantly, Andy kisses him on the forehead. But Laura pushes further, telling him to kiss him on the lips, claiming it's a custom. Horrified, Andy pulls back. Laura leans in and kisses Phil herself. Later, in the car, Laura insists they should be happy, as funerals are supposed to be celebrations after all. She asks Andy what he does for fun. Sarcastically, he replies, "Get hammered." Laura lights up, thinking it's a great idea, and so they do. That night, the trio plays games, drinks, and dances. Laura even allows Piper a drink or two. Eventually, Piper passes out. Andy, feeling a bit lighter, genuinely thanks Laura for helping them get through the day. Laura, understanding, says she's been through something similar. She encourages Andy to talk about his feelings, saying it helps ease the burden. Andy hesitates, then asks how she coped with Kathy's death. Laura responds honestly, "I haven't." She admits that when her daughter was buried, it felt like she was abandoning her, so she stayed at the cemetery for days. In a trembling voice, Laura adds, "I'd do anything to hear her call me Mum one more time." There's a beat of silence. Andy finally opens up. He shares how he and his father only ever really talked when it involved Piper. Laura interrupts, "Is that why you hit her when you were 8? Andy freezes. "Who told you that?" he asks. "Wendy," Laura replies. Andy reveals that when his father married Piper's mom, it felt like his father had finally found his family. So, in a desperate attempt to get his father's attention, he says he would act out at school. His father, furious, would hit him, always turning on the shower to drown out the sounds. After midnight, Laura urinates into a cup and pours it onto Andy's pants while he sleeps. It turns out she's been secretly drugging Andy by lacing his protein powder with drugs. She unlocks his phone and deletes all the photos of Oliver. Suddenly, Laura hears a cat screaming. She goes outside and takes Oliver to the bathroom and gently says, "I know you're hungry, but it is not the right time." Then she asks, softly but intently, "Are you in there? And did I do it right?" Oliver looks straight into her eyes, and the faucet behind Laura turns on. Oliver's eyes slowly turn red, and from deep within, a cat-like groan rumbles from his throat. The next morning, Andy wakes up soaked in urine. Frustrated and confused, he gets up to clean himself but runs into Laura in the hallway. She insists on taking his clothes. Just then, Piper walks in and excitedly tells Andy that she and Laura are going shopping. Then Laura smells Andy's clothes and asks, "Did you pee?"
I don't know what happened.
Andy, seriously?
Laura, with a disturbingly gentle tone, says, "It's okay, you should take a shower." As Andy walks away, Laura says to Piper, "Your brother's not doing well," and promises to explain more in the car. Andy washes himself using the garden tap outside, as taking a shower still triggers his trauma. Just then, he sees Oliver lift his hand near the window. Thinking it's a wave, Andy waves back. Then Andy heads to Oliver's room but finds it locked, so he grabs a knife and pries it open. In the living room, Andy bombards Oliver with questions, but Oliver just stares into space. Andy grabs a notepad and pen, hands it to him, and says he'll only give him food if he writes something. Oliver takes the notepad and writes. Andy hands him a slice of cantaloupe still stuck to the knife. But instead of just eating the fruit, Oliver grabs the entire knife. Andy turns back for a moment, then hears a metallic scraping sound. When he looks back, he sees Oliver biting down on the knife. Panicked, Andy yanks the knife away and drags Oliver outside to get help. But as soon as Oliver crosses the strange white circle painted on the ground, he screams and vomits. His body begins convulsing violently. Andy hears a faint whisper, "Help me." Just then, Laura and Piper arrive. Laura loses it and yells at Andy to take Piper inside. Noticing Andy's panic, Piper gently soothes him. "It's okay," she says. "Laura's going to get you help." This confuses Andy, then he spots the paper Oliver had written on earlier, "Bird." Meanwhile, Laura takes Oliver into her room and starts playing the occult video. Almost immediately, he snaps out of whatever trance he was in. "What are you doing to me?" he screams, his voice raw and terrified. She quickly covers his mouth with her hand. Then Laura watches the ritual and following its instructions, she begins drawing circles on his head, trying to calm him down. Soon after, Piper and Andy knock on Laura's door. Still angry at Andy, Laura only lets Piper in. Then, Laura feeds Oliver a lock of Phil's hair. Piper, concerned, asks if Oliver will be okay. Laura smiles and says, "He'll be just fine." Later, Andy musters the courage to shower again, but as he enters the bathroom, the door creaks open behind him. Standing there is the pale figure of his dead father. "She will die in the rain," Phil says quietly. Andy panics and tries to run, but slips and slams his head hard against the floor. Sometime later, Andy wakes up in a hospital room, dazed. Through the window, he sees rain pouring. Andy pleads with the doctors to let him go, insisting his sister is in danger, but they sedate him instead. Back at Laura's house, she happily watches the pool as it fills with rainwater. Meanwhile, Piper texts her brother, Laura said you don't want any visitors. I miss you more. That night, Piper quietly walks to Laura's room. I can't sleep, she whispers. I'm worried about Andy. Laura, with a warm smile, asks her to come in. Then, Laura wistfully says that Kathy loved the rain. Piper, watching the TV, asks if that's her, and Laura replies, yes. Piper then asks Laura to describe Kathy. Laura responds, she was 12 years old with long brown hair and freckles. The next day, Laura visits Andy, who immediately asks where Piper is. She replies that Piper is home with Oliver. Laura then tells him he needs to stay in the hospital another day. Confused, Andy asks again where Piper is. Laura urges him to calm down and says Piper sent him a gift, a perfume. Andy, still unsettled, warns Laura not to let Piper out in the rain, saying she could die in it. When Laura looks confused, he explains that just before he fell in the shower, he saw his father.
You don't think it's because your dad died in the shower and I killed him?
Andy is shocked, Laura explains again, suggesting that maybe he's just associating rain with death because his father died in the shower. Frustrated and confused, Andy beats himself up. Laura promises she'll keep Piper inside. But she does the exact opposite. Laura and Piper play outside in the rain, while Laura reminisces about Kathy's face and the times she played in the pool. Later on, Laura takes Piper into the garden shed and gives her a purple cardigan, saying it was Kathy's favorite. Piper thanks her. Laura then gently tells Piper she can call her mom, but Piper replies with a soft, maybe. Laura also ties Piper's hair and comments that Kathy used to wear hers the same way. Then, in a tender voice, Laura asks whether Piper would still like to live with her even after Andy has turned 18. Piper declines, saying she always wanted to stay with her brother, but promises they would visit her on weekends. Laura then tells Piper there's one more thing she needs to show her. Gently, she guides Piper toward the freezer and places her hand on Kathy's cold, lifeless body. When Piper hesitantly asks what it is, Laura simply replies, meat. The next day, while driving Andy home from the hospital, Laura vents to Wendy over the phone, clearly unhappy about his early discharge. She says she argued with the staff, stating that Andy had suffered a psychotic break, but they told her he was showing signs of recovery. Once home, Andy checks on Piper, but Laura interrupts from outside, accusing him of being a little creepy.
Bit creepy, isn't it?
Later, Andy tries to work out but gets distracted. He ends up drinking his protein shake. Meanwhile, Laura continues watching the disturbing ritual, its true purpose finally becoming clear. Laura is trying to bring her daughter back from the dead. The ritual involves 4 steps. Contact the demon. Laura has managed to summon a demon, which is now inhabiting Oliver. Mimic the death. The person meant to become the new body, Piper, must die in exactly the same way as the original, Kathy. Since Kathy drowned in a rain-filled pool, Piper must drown in a similar way. Consume the body. The demon must consume the original body. In this case, Oliver must eat Kathy's corpse. Transfer the soul. Finally, the demon must vomit the remains into the new vessel. Oliver must regurgitate Kathy's remains into Piper's mouth. The next morning, Laura sprays herself with Andy's perfume and punches Piper in the face. Later, when Andy wakes up and comes downstairs, he notices Piper's black eye and demands to know who hurt her. Laura immediately blames him. Piper quietly says, "It can't be him." But Laura cuts in, accusing Andy of being abusive, just like his father. Piper is stunned to learn their father ever hit Andy. Then Andy notices something strange about Oliver's appearance and tries to take a photo to show the social worker. They get into a scuffle, and in frustration, Andy punches the wall. Laura pretends that Andy hit her. He tells Piper they need to leave, but she hesitates.
Grapefruit, but...
So Andy goes alone to meet Wendy. While waiting, he sees a missing child poster. Oliver is listed as Connor Bird. Meanwhile, despite Piper's objections, Laura drops her off at goalball practice. Back with Andy, Wendy tells him that Laura claimed he wets the bed and is aggressive toward Laura and Piper. But Andy ignores her questions and points out that Laura kidnapped a child. He blames the system for not doing a proper background check. Wendy then drops a bombshell. Laura worked in foster care for 20 years and is a close friend of hers. She insists that Laura would never hurt a child. Meanwhile, Laura returns home to find that Oliver has ransacked the entire house. Slowly, Oliver comes near Laura and takes a bite of her flesh. In pain and panic, Laura runs and locks herself inside a room. Outside, Oliver begins speaking and screaming in Laura's voice. It's revealed that if the demon gets any part of a person's body, whether it's a piece of flesh, a strand of hair, or anything else, it can mimic them. That's why Laura fed Oliver Phil's hair, to drive Andy further into paranoia and create a rift between him and Piper. Slowly and methodically, Laura bandages her hand. Then, to soothe Oliver, she draws a symbol on the window and eventually lets him eat Kathy's body. Back with Andy, he tells Wendy that Laura called the little boy Oliver, but Wendy is skeptical, noting that Oliver is actually Laura's nephew's name and has red hair. Eventually, Andy convinces Wendy to visit Laura's home. On the way, Andy leaves Piper a heartfelt voice message. He confesses that their father used to hurt him, especially when Piper wasn't home. He says he lied about it because he didn't want her to see how ugly the world can be. He expresses deep regret for the one time he hit Piper when he was 8, and says he's sworn to protect her ever since. He insists it was Laura who punched her, and that she also kidnapped Oliver. The message ends with, "I love you, Pipe." Grapefruit. Andy hands the phone to Wendy without ending the call, allowing Laura to hear Wendy's voice. Realizing Wendy is coming, Laura hurriedly starts cleaning the house and pours Andy's protein powder down the sink. Wendy and Andy arrive at Laura's house. Wendy instructs him to stay in the car. At the door, Wendy tells Laura that Andy has raised serious concerns about child abuse, and she's required to inspect the home. Laura welcomes her in and shows her Piper and Andy's rooms. Meanwhile, Andy slips out of the car, climbs over the fence, and approaches the locked garden shed. He grabs a bird bath, smashes the lock, and peers inside, only to find Oliver hunched over a corpse, eating. Back inside, Wendy shows Laura a photo of Connor Bird, the missing child, and asks if she's seen him. Just then, Wendy notices Laura bleeding and hears Andy screaming for her from outside. Laura calmly says to Wendy, "I can bring Kathy back." Terrified, Wendy rushes out and sees the grotesque scene Andy uncovered. Just as the two try to escape, Laura runs over both Wendy and Andy. Wendy is killed instantly. Andy, still alive but badly injured, so Laura dips his head into a puddle. As he struggles to breathe, Laura calmly whispers, "Everything's going to be okay." Later, Laura picks up Piper from practice. The instructor mentions that she had called Laura earlier about Piper's black eye, but Laura simply responds, "Not now." Back home, Piper asks Laura to call her phone since she can't find it. Laura replies she will. Moments later, Piper hears Andy's voice and follows the sound upstairs. She touches someone, and just then, Laura appears, asking what Piper is doing here. Piper says she heard Andy's voice, but Laura insists it was just Oliver. Realizing Laura had lied about Oliver's hair, Piper runs and locks herself in a room. Inside, she stumbles upon a body and identifies it as her brother by feeling his braces. His hands are partially eaten, explaining how Oliver was able to mimic Andy's voice. Piper sobs and whispers, "Grapefruit," apologizing to Andy. Laura unlocks the door with a spare key and chillingly explains her plan to resurrect Kathy to her. Piper manages to escape, but hits her head in the process and loses consciousness. Laura drags her to the pool, where a grotesquely bloated Oliver waits. Laura begins to drown Piper, who fights and struggles. Just as she's slipping away, Piper screams a single word that stops Laura in her tracks. "Mom." Laura freezes. Her mind flashes back to Kathy, gasping, drowning, helpless. Piper escapes, but Oliver isn't ready to let her go. He lunges at her, but she kicks him hard in the stomach, causing him to vomit violently. Taking the opportunity, Piper runs toward the road to get help. Meanwhile, Oliver sees the missing child poster with his real name, Connor, on it. He deliberately steps beyond the chalk line Laura had drawn to contain him. Meanwhile, Laura gently carries Kathy's decayed body to the pool, but not before reopening the gash on her own arm. As blood mixes with the rain in the pool, she cradles Kathy in the water. Eventually, the authorities locate both Connor and Laura. Once safely in the car, Piper takes out Andy's phone, which she had taken earlier, and plays the voicemail he left for her. As Andy's voice fills the silence, his love, his regrets, and his promise, Piper listens closely. Then, in the distance, a plane flies overhead. Piper looks up and smiles.